Welcome back to another episode of the Move to Spain podcast. You all know me, John Towell from Just Law Solicitors.com. And today we are honoured because we have one of the partners in the firm, Belen. Hi, Belen.
Hi, John. How are you?
I'm fine. So we're actually recording this in January, but it's going to go out in February. So we don't pretend that it's live or anything like that. So did you have a good Christmas?
A very good Christmas. What about you?
Yeah, all good. But it's nice to be on the Costa del Sol. Obviously, it's a bit colder in the winter, but it's nothing like the rest of the world, is it?
Oh, yes. Well, these last days, at least in Malaga, it's, I think, coldest than ever. But that's good.
But colder than ever probably means what? 10, 12,
Mm.
13?
Oh, yeah, 12
Yeah,
degrees.
there
But
you
for
go.
me, that's a lot.
If you're listening in Canada and America, that's 12 degrees Celsius, not Fahrenheit. We have a problem with 12 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, that's the coldest Malaga can get, I think.
Yeah, there you go. So there's the answer. What's the coldest winter temperature in Malaga or somewhere on the coast, on the Costa del Sol? Your answer is 12. Yeah. And then in the summer, what, 30, maximum 32, 33, something like that?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe
there you
35 in the worst days, but yeah, no more than 33, 32.
Yeah, right. So Belen is obviously a lawyer and she's a partner at justlawsolicitors.com and she oversees the office and one of her specialities is property law. And let's face it, everyone's going to be listening to this podcast if they're thinking about buying a property in Spain. Now, as we look forward to 2026, I mean, we're in 2026 now, the first question I want to ask you: are there any laws that are going to come into force that we know of that are ready for legislation, going to pass into the Spanish legislation that makes any difference to people buying any properties in Spain?
No, so the answer is no. At the moment, we don't have any law coming soon.
There
No,
you go.
everything remains the same.
Yeah, so just relax. If you're buying a property in Spain, nothing is going to happen this year. Now, everybody now is screaming at Alexa or whatever they're listening to. Oh, but what about the 100% property tax law? That hasn't been passed, has it? It's just a comment by the current Prime Minister of Spain, isn't it?
Yeah, so when people and clients ask, I normally say that that was just a declaration of possible future intentions, but not at
Yeah,
all a law. In fact, they haven't spoken about that again. So it is very
yeah,
likely that the government will change. And even if it doesn't change, it is very unlikely for them to say this law, especially, well, John, that it could be declared illegal by the European Union.
yeah,
The communities could decide to make any other law against that. So it is very unlikely. That was, I think, my personal opinion, that it was just to scare people. But, well,
yeah. I
my
mean,
personal opinion.
yeah, if we try and break it down, I think one of the points that you mentioned, and we don't want to be political on the Move to Spain podcast, we've got enough to worry about. But when are the elections in Spain? Do we know when they are?
Yeah, 2027.
Right, 2027. So Spain is going to have elections next year, and there could be a change of government. And the other thing about this 100% property tax, and again, it was just a comment, there isn't any Spanish legislation in what's called the BOE, that Belen can read and analyse. So it's very, very difficult to comment on something that hasn't happened. And normally we don't. But the thing about the casual or declaration that the Prime Minister made is it will not affect anybody who is coming to Spain on a visa, and it won't affect anybody who has an EU passport, will it?
Exactly, yeah. So the
Yeah.
idea would be for people of third countries out of the European Union that are not residents in Spain. In any case, in the past, many years ago, this same politic group tried to do something similar, and it was rejected by the authorities. So I would say to
Yeah.
people, do not worry for that because it is extremely unlikely to have that new law in Spain.
Leaping forward, but if we assume it's coming to law, and I think that the European Court of Justice can say that it's illegal because it discriminates against people who aren't EU citizens.
Exactly. That's what happened actually a few years ago. So
Yeah,
basically the community, the European Union, sorry, could declare this illegal because it is not the same treatment and every person deserves to be treated
yeah,
equally, even if you are
yeah,
from the US or
yeah,
wherever you are from. Yeah.
yeah. US, Canada, South Africa, UK. The other thing is, and again, we don't. Me and Belen are not used to doing this because we never normally comment about laws that are not coming in because we don't know what to say because we haven't got any details. But the 100% property tax, it could be an increase in 100%. So if you're paying 7, you pay 14. If you pay 10, you pay 20.
Exactly.
Or
Exactly. So this was very misunderstood by people and by the lawyers themselves, because when the government said increase in 100% tax, they didn't mean that you were going to pay the same purchase price that you're paying as taxes. So 100% of the purchase price as taxes. What they meant is that they might be an increase of 100%, which means that if currently in the Costa Blanca you pay a 10, so you would pay a 20. But in any case, they haven't said ever that you were going to pay 100%
no,
of the
no,
purchase price on taxes.
yeah. And the other thing is, I don't know the technical term, but Spain has regional autonomous communities, and people who listen to the podcast and people who buy a house will know that if you buy a house in Andalusia, you pay a different amount of tax to Costa Blanca or the Basque Country. It's a different amount, isn't it?
Yes, so the tax is the transmission tax, which is the tax that you pay when you buy a second-hand property. It's a tax that changes depending on the community of Spain in which you're buying. Here in Andalusia, for example, we have a 7%.
That's it. And Costa Blanca's 10, the Basque Country is, I think, 4, Tenerife is 6. But the point I want to make is the regional autonomous communities, if this becomes law, could say, no, we're not doing it, because some of the regional, I mean, again, I don't want to get political, but the government is left wing, some of the regional autonomous communities are right wing, and they might say, well, no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, exactly, because it is a right that the communities have. The communities have the power, according to the Constitution of Spain, they have the power to decide the rate that they apply for this tax. This is
Yeah,
why they could appeal this law. So if you put all these things together, the result is extremely,
yeah.
extremely unlikely, not to say impossible, because nothing is impossible, but extremely, extremely unlikely for people
Yeah,
from third countries out of the
yeah,
European Union to pay 100% tax.
yeah. And again, I have to stress it's not law. There's no date for it coming in. If you're thinking about buying a property in Spain and you're sure Spain's for you, go for it. That's the way forward. And again, it's not normal for Belen and I to talk about laws that haven't been implemented. And we don't want to be political, but it just could be a way of getting votes. But we are not politicians, we are lawyers. So yeah, there's
Exactly.
that. Yeah. So the other thing is, it's been a busy Christmas. I mean, don't worry, the rest of the office is off, but Belen and I and the other and partners are working. But one of the questions that we got asked on the Move to Spain Facebook group, and it's difficult to give advice when you just type in a response to a comment on the Move to Spain Facebook group, is one of the questions was, can I buy a property that doesn't have a first occupation license? So I think the first occupation license in Spanish is called an LPO. Is that right?
So in Spanish, yes, it is LPO. Can you buy a property without an LPO or a first occupation license? So the answer is, as always, depends.
Yeah.
Depends on the area of Spain in which you're buying, depends on the property that you're buying. So, for example, in some areas of Spain, it is mandatory to buy a property with the first occupation license. If you buy a property without the first occupation license, the notary will not authorize the deed. In some other
Right.
areas, it's not mandatory, but what it is always is advisable, highly advisable, because when you sell, your buyer might request you for this, and the cost for obtaining the first occupation license might be really, really high, depending on the town hall, depending on the features of the property. The cost can be up to 30,000 euros. So at least it is a document that you should know before you sign a reservation contract if your property has or doesn't have.
Yeah. So this is something else to take from this. We always say take independent legal advice. If you take independent legal advice before you sign or pay anything, all will be well. But to go into particulars for this part of the podcast is don't sign or pay anything. Ask the lawyer, hopefully Belen, if you need a first occupation license, because as Belen said, you can buy a property without the first occupation license. You then come to sell it, and it could be as much as 30,000 to get that. You just don't want to go down that road. That's the issue. You just don't want to do that. The other thing I wanted to ask you is there's a lot of people, and again, we have a lawyer called Pedro Sanchez, just to confuse everyone who's been on the podcast. And we spoke about DAFOs and AFOs, and there's a whole episode on DAFOs and AFOs that you could listen to. But the other question that people ask, and I don't know if there's a simple answer, is can you buy a property without the DAFO, or some people call it the AFO?
You can. Basically, the AFO is a document from town hall that proves that the property that initially was built illegally, because it is in a rustic plot,
Mm.
has become legal.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it has been legalized. That is the AFO. You
yeah,
can buy a property in a rustic place without an AFO. Yes, legally you can. The law doesn't oblige you to have this AFO in order to buy or in order to sell, at least the current law.
yeah.
Now, the
That's
thing
it.
is, again, if you sell, it is quite likely that your buyer will at least ask if the property has an AFO or not.
Yeah,
Plus, it is always safest because the only way of being 100% sure that the town hall will not start a demolition process against the property is with this
yeah,
AFO, because it is
yeah,
the license that proves that the property has been legalized. In any
yeah,
case,
yeah,
depends a lot on where the property is located, the rules of the town hall. It is always
yeah,
advisable to have it, same as with the first occupation license. But if you want to buy it without it, you can proceed legally. Yeah.
yeah. But be very careful if you do that. I mean, for example, I bought a very old Cortijo in the Albaharas, and I don't know what the paperwork situation was, but that Cortijo built like, I don't know, 300 years ago. So that wasn't an illegal construction that needed an AFO, was it?
If it was in a just for people to understand, if you're buying a property that has been built in a rustic plot, everything
Mm,
that has been built in a rustic plot, except for a few town halls that allow people to obtain work licenses in the rustic places. Unless that few town halls in Spain, everything that has been built in a rustic plot is illegal, in principle. Now, depending on the kind of plot, if 6 years pass and the town hall hasn't realized that this property has been built, the property doesn't become legal, it becomes legalizable. How do you
right,
legalize it? With the AFO.
right. Okay, right. So there we are. That's the that question dealt with. Again, it's impossible to give specific advice because it depends on the property, where it is, how old it is. It's the architect that determines the age of the property, isn't it? I think.
Yes, exactly. So it is very important when we're dealing with a rustic property to know the age where the property was built and also the kind of plot, because it is not the same. If you buy a property in a rustic normal plot, in which if 6 years have passed, you can legalize it, or if you're
Mm,
buying a property that is maybe close to a river, or for any reason it is placed in a property that is classified, sorry, in a plot that is classified by the town hall as a protected area. In that case, you have to be especially careful. This is why, well, we always recommend our clients to contact us or any other law firm before signing a reservation contract. Because what
yeah.
happens if you sign a reservation contract on a rustic property and then you find out that the plot is protected?
So you sign a reservation contract on a rustic property, and then you find that it's protected. But the reservation contract, a lot of people go and they see the agent, um, and they sign a reservation contract. But honestly, I know we've got a horse in the race because we're independent lawyers in Spain, but people should speak to their own lawyer before they sign the reservation contract. It's very important to do that, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, In many purchases that we have assisted, we have seen that the property was placed in a protected area. This is something that anyone listing a property should make people aware of, because
Yeah.
when people are buying as a consumers, which means that you are protected by the consumer rights according to the law. So any property that is listed in order to be sold, well, you should warn people if this property is placed in a protected area. Well, in my whole experience, I haven't seen any agency warning about this. It is then us that, we start assisting the client, we request the certificate, the agent hopefully will say, yes, I will provide it, or they will say why or whatever. And once we get it, we make aware that this property is placed in a protected area, which is in fact something that the seller should know when you list the property. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, in reality, it doesn't happen.
Right. But in general as well, I mean, even if you're buying what would you call it, condo, an apartment on a complex, a townhouse, always speak to the lawyer regarding the reservation contract, because the reservation contract has to be in your favour. You don't want to sign something in Spanish or in English that's been drafted by the estate agent, because it might not be in your interest to sign that document. It's like I said before, always take independent legal advice before you sign or pay anything.
Yeah, and the thing is that even if they tell you, if the agent tells you or the seller tells you this contract is signed just to take the property off the market, well, even then you are committing yourself to buy that specific property. So what happens if you sign the reservation contract and after that you realize that you have to request the certificate of non-protected area? Well, the only one that can apply for it is the seller. You cannot
Right.
compel the seller if it hasn't been stated as the seller's obligation in the reservation contract. This is why, well, it is just a contract, but not just a contract, because it is
Yes,
important. You are committing yourself to buy something, and you must know, or you should know, the features, the details of the property that you are committing yourself to buy.
absolutely, absolutely. And then following on from the reservation contract, where you take an independent legal advice, also we'd have to look at the then follows the ARAS contract, doesn't there?
Yes, so the first step in order to take the property off the market is to sign the reservation contract. We always make a pre-due diligence on the property in order to know if it is rustic, if it is urban, if it has an LPO, first occupation license or not. We make sure that the seller will obtain a very important document that we have not mentioned, which is the urban infraction certificate before completion. So once we have
Mm.
signed the reservation contract, next step is to sign the private purchase contract, which in Spanish we call the arras contract. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the other interesting point to make, and if people are in any doubt, they can go back and listen to episode 5 of the Move to Spain podcast, where I think it was when Sean was here and I spoke to a Spanish notary. The Spanish notary, again, listen to it. I don't want to make all the points, but listen to it. The Spanish notary is not interested in the reservation contract or the ARAS contract, are they?
No, so the thing is that the Spanish law applied for buying properties in Spain is very, very old. So the only thing that is mandatory to be provided before completion at the notary is the energy certificate. So no first occupation license, no human infection certificate. The notary will only look that you are the
Mhm.
owner up to date,
Yeah,
that the seller is the owner up to date, and that the
yeah,
property has an energy certificate, because if it doesn't, both the seller and the buyer might get fined. That's the only thing
yeah,
that the notary will look at. Then all of the rest of the due diligence is done by the independent lawyer.
absolutely. So the notary doesn't care if you've signed a reservation contract, it's unfair, you don't get your deposit back, etc., etc. People can go back and they can listen to episode 5 of the contract of the Move to Spain podcast. And like I say, if you choose not to take independent legal advice, you could go to the notary, you could legally buy something, but you could have a whole load of trouble with it. Basically, that's the short answer, isn't it?
Yeah, so we find many people, because 40 years ago, maybe people didn't use a lawyer as much as they do now. We find people trying to sell the properties, and normally I always ask, does the property have a first occupation license? They say, I don't know. You don't know
That's it.
because, well, by the time that you bought, you didn't take independent legal advice, you didn't hire a lawyer, so you don't exactly know what your property has from a legal perspective and what it doesn't. So it
Yeah,
is important in order to make
yeah,
sure the details of the
yeah,
property and if the
yeah.
property has all the legal documents or not.
Yeah. I mean, there is a situation, yeah, that's possible, as Belen said. You can buy a property, all is well, you move into the property, everything is good, but you have a whole load of trouble when you come to sell that property.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, right. Right. So, well, I hope we didn't frighten people too much, and they're still going to buy a property in Spain. I mean, obviously, Belen, you're the expert. Is there anything else that we need to add? Because I'm not an expert on the Spanish property purchase
Well,
process.
we can mention for our clients buying properties as an investment. You know that we had this big change in tourist rentals last year,
Oh,
which I
yeah,
think it
yeah.
was the biggest change we had in 2025. So, for people listening to us, just to say that you can still buy properties as an investment, either with your company or either yourself personally. The only thing
Mm,
is that now, if you want to obtain a tourist license, you must be extra careful because you
yeah.
must have an authorization from the community of owners with some
Mm,
exceptions. So, for example, if the property already has a tourist license in place, you can take that tourist license without the community's the authorization. So,
yeah.
well, you can still buy an investment property, but you have to be careful. Well, as always,
Right.
careful as always.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're buying a property on a condo, if the property already has a tourist license, don't worry, that passes. If you're buying a property on a condo, a community of owners, that kind of thing, and it doesn't have a tourist license, you need to make sure that you've got the license. If you want one, this is just for renting out for things like Airbnb short term. It's not for renting out long term or anything like that. If you want one, make sure you speak to Belen again before you sign or pay anything. Now, if, for example, I was buying a townhouse, so to keep it simple, a detached house in Fuengirola, I'm not connected to my neighbours, I'm not on a community. If that property already has a tourist license, that would just pass to me as the new owner, wouldn't it?
Yes, so at the moment, if the property doesn't belong to a condo or to a community of owners, you can still apply for the tourist license. If the property already had the tourist license, you can take it. Yeah, you
Yeah.
have to register
So
it in the land registry, but that's a simple step.
yeah. So if, for example, I'm looking at a detached property in Fuengirola, it's not in a community of owners, and I'm negotiating with the agent, the seller, etc. And I want a tourist license. I want to think, oh, I can rent it out short term. What would I need to do? How would I ensure that I'm going to get one before I buy the property?
Fuengirola is not a good example because tourist licenses at the moment are not being granted here. But let's think about a town hall, for example, the town hall of Benalmádena. That one is
Okay.
granting tourist licenses. So, for example, if you buy a detached property, you have to bear in mind that you cannot get the tourist license before you buy the property unless you get the seller to get it before completion.
Ah,
So
right. That's
I'm
the answer. Yeah.
what I'm recommending our clients is when you make the visit, you get the seller to know that you want to obtain a tourist license, and maybe, in the initial negotiations, as one of the conditions of the purchase, you can ask your seller to start the process of obtaining it. So once you have
Right.
signed the reservation contract, you have shown that you are committed to that property. Well, in that moment, your seller starts the process of obtaining the tourist license, just in case the law changes. Because at the moment, the land registry and the authorities of Andalusia are requesting us to show that you are the owner of the property officially registered before applying for the tourist license.
Right. So that's it. So basically, the short answer is whether or not you need a tourist license depends on where you buy in Spain. And Belen's give the example of Fuengirola and Benalmádena, but Spain's a big place. So check with Belen that. And the way to make sure that you get the license before you buy the property is to have it in the contract somewhere where the seller has to do it.
It might happen that the seller will say, no, I will not take that obligation. Well, in that case, we can always wait until we have completed the purchase and the property has been officially registered into the buyer's name, and then we can apply for the tourist license. Actually, I don't
Yeah.
think we will have big changes in the next months, but well, you never know.
Right. And is it a risk? I mean, say, for example, you don't need one in Fuengirola, but you need one in Benalmádena. Would it be more of a risk if, say, for example, the seller said, I'm not going to do it, and I said, well, okay, I'll buy it, but I'll take my chances with the Benalmádena town hall? That's a little bit more risky, isn't it? Because presumably the Benalmádena town hall may say no.
They may say no, but well, I don't think they will. At the moment, the town halls that are saying no already said no 1 year ago. So it doesn't
Ah, okay.
seem very likely for the rest of the town halls to say no. You know, Malaga
Right.
and Fuengirola are the only ones. So
Yeah.
I don't think the rest of the town halls will say the same. But in any case, and as long as you have the first occupation license on the property, which is mandatory in order to obtain the tourist license, and you have the tourist license submitted in the Junta de Andalucía showing that you are the owner, in principle, that's it. I don't really see a big risk. But of course, taking the seller to obtain it before completion is always safer.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, and remember, this only applies if you want to buy a house and then rent it short term, not long term, just the sort of short term holiday thing. If you're not looking for a holiday property you can let for a holiday let, this doesn't apply to you. So don't have any nightmares about this. If you do, make sure that you mention it to Belen at the start of the process before you sign or pay anything, and we can deal with it for you. Is that it? Have we finished now?
Yes, we are. I just wanted to mention that. I think
Yeah.
it's quite important, but we're
Oh,
done now. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, just to recap, if you're buying a property in Spain in 2026, we're recording this on is it the 7th of January? We're recording this on the
Today is the
7th of
7th. Yeah.
January, and there's nothing legislation wise that's going to come in 2026 that we're aware of that we can see in the Spanish, what's called the BOE, that's going to change that. Obviously, if something does happen, something does change, you'll hear about it on the podcast, you'll hear about it in the Move to Spain Facebook group, the TikTok, the Instagram, whatever. So anyway, well, thanks for coming on, Belen. I can imagine you're busy just coming back after Three Kings, and hopefully everything continues to go well in 2026.
I hope so. Yeah. So thank you so much, John.
No, thank you for coming on and explaining all that. Because I have no idea, and people ask me all the time in the Move to Spain Facebook group. Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye. Right, that's great. Thank you very much.
Okay, John.
Yeah, I think